Hello, Year 10 Social Studies. It's me, Miss Sarmiento. I hope you and your whanau are doing well in lockdown. Um, so I did say on the Google Classroom page that we will be looking at a new event this week. And the event we'll be looking at this week is the occupation of Bastion Point. So previously we looked at Parihaka and the invasion there of 1881. And I know I did it a little bit differently with Parihaka, where I just posted the slides of the presentation. I got you guys to read them and do the exercise with it. But this time I thought not only would I post the slides, but I'll also record myself reading the slides. So you guys have the option there. You can either read them on your own or you can have me read them to you. So let's get started. We're looking at the 5 W's and H of the occupation of Bastion Point of 1977. So your first W is where. Where is Bastion Point? So Bastion Point in Te Reo Maori, Takaparawhau, is a coastal piece of land in Orake overlooking the Waitemata Harbor. So Orake is in very own piece of land, Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau. And if you drive along Tamaki Drive, you go past Mission Bay and all of that, you'll reach Bastion Point. So it's not too far from home. It's in a very familiar area. And because it overlooks the Waitemata Harbor, it has very, very beautiful views. It's quite incredible. And the photo I posted there is just one of the views you can see from Bastion Point. And you and your family can actually go and visit Bastion Point and enjoy the sunshine there and enjoy the views. Obviously, we can't do that just yet, but I would highly recommend you and your family take a drive up there once it's safe to do so. And plan a little family day out there. It's beautiful. Your next W is who and when. So who occupied Bastion Point and when did they occupy it? So before colonization, Ngāti Whātua already occupied Bastion Point and other land within the Orake area. After the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi in 1840, the Crown ended up taking most of Ngāti Whātua's land and left them with very little in the end. So in 1977, a major event happened to take place there at Bastion Point. So for the who, you've got Ngāti Whātua and the Crown. So Ngāti Whātua being the iwi who overlook the land in Orake region. And you've got the Crown who are the, England, the colonizers, for lack of a better word. And for the when, you've got prior to colonization. So Ngāti Whātua already occupied and owned the area of Bastion Point. They owned the land within the Orake area. And then you've also got 1977, which is when this major event, when the occupation of Bastion Point took place. So let's move on. You've got your next W, which is what. What happened during the occupation of Bastion Point? So in 1977, Bastion Point was occupied for 506 days by members of the public, as well as members of the Ngāti Whātua iwi. This was done in protest against the Crown's proposed sale of the land. So the Crown actually wanted to sell Bastion Point to developers so that they could build high-income housing there. And obviously the people of Ngāti Whātua and members of the public were very, very upset with this decision and decided to protest against that. So the protest was led by Joe Hawke, and Hawke founded the Orake Māori Action Committee. And this committee was specifically put together to protest issues like this, to protest the unfair selling of land without iwi consent. So protesters believe that Ngāti Whātua had taken great care of Takaparawhau, Bastion Point, for many decades, and that the Crown's proposal to sell the land was unjust, and therefore they decided to occupy the land, which lasted 506 days. To further cement their point, protesters constructed a makeshift marae on the land, and they even began to grow crops there too. So these actions taken by protesters were done in a bid to show just how passionate they were about having the land returned to Ngāti Whātua. And in doing so, like building structures there like a marae and fortifying the land to create a little farm or garden for your crops, that just showed people how serious protesters were. Um, and it was kind of like a big show saying, hey, look, we're not going anywhere. We're staying right here. We're going to build a marae. We're going to start growing crops, and we're not going anywhere. So it was a really big, example of social action, I would say, doing that. So your next W is why. Why did people protest the selling of Bastion Point? So as mentioned before, people were very upset with the government's decision to sell the land because prior to colonization, before the British came, Ngāti Whātua had already occupied and tended to the land, and their people lived on that land, they thrived, and they lived there at peace. People believed that it was unfair to sell the land without consent from the iwi. They also believed that the government's refusal to give Bastion Point back to Ngāti Whātua did not honor principles from Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So there are some similarities between this event and what happened at Parihaka in terms of the Crown failing to honor principles of Te Tiriti. So that's something to think about, and we'll discuss that later on in the week. Sorry, my cat wants to join in. So the next slide, you've got your H. How did the occupation end? So on May 25th, 1978, on the 507th day of protest, around 800 members of the police, as well as members of the New Zealand Royal Army, swarmed Bastion Point. So 507 days, that is well over a year and a half spent protesting on that land. So they weren't joking around. When they said they weren't going anywhere, they really weren't going anywhere. So the members of the police and New Zealand Royal Army, they actually came onto Bastion Point. They destroyed the structures that protesters built, such as the makeshift marae, and they also destroyed the crops that they grew. And they then proceeded to evict and arrest 222 protesters from that piece of land. So among those 222 protesters, it was a mix of men, women, children, you have the elderly. These guys didn't care. They had one job, and that was to get these people to leave. In 1988, the New Zealand Labour government finally returned Bastion Point, Takaparafo, to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei with compensation, monetary compensation, meaning to give them some money, as part of a Treaty of Waitangi settlement process. So the settlement also included an apology to Ngāti Whātua from the government for their wrongdoings. So this is also quite similar to what happened with the Dawn raids, whereas much later, after the event took place, the government decided to make a formal apology, a very public apology to those who had been affected. And the same happened here almost 10 years after the occupation ended. The government decided to put together a public and formal apology towards Ngāti Whātua. Yes, so you can see the similarities there. Perfect, so that's the end of the presentation. Next, we will look a little deeper into the occupation and its links to the treaty. We'll deep dive into that a little bit more like we did with Parihaka. So with this, you guys, I also have a little worksheet for you to do. I will post this on the Google Classroom page, so don't you worry. It's just a very simple 5 W's and H worksheet where you answer the questions here. So the answers for these questions are actually in the slides. What I want you guys to do is to read them very carefully and then write out the answers in your own words. So I don't want you to copy and paste or go on Google and copy and paste, but I want you to reword the answer out in your own words, and then turn it in through Google Classroom as well under the classwork tab. And that's all from me today. So we will look at Bastion Point a little bit more later in the week. This was just a little quick introduction to it. Um, but other than that, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week until we meet again. I hope you guys have a great day. Good night.